Mr. Rosenthal. Dave. All right, the time is 8:29 p.m. and we are now reconvened in open session. We have no action on closed session items, so we will move right into board members' reports. We will start with the activity report. Ms. Helliger.
Good evening. Our last report was on July 17th, so it's been quite some time. We have been meeting with the state legislators in Austin, attended education legislative lunches, attended new teacher orientation, governance committee meeting, Willow Ridge High School teacher supply drive, Willow Ridge High School ninth grade orientation, Fort Bend ISD Office of Personnel Convocation, Child Nutrition Facilities extended day, Fort Bend ISD Board recognition and Sugar Land City Council meeting, Fort Bend ISD teacher convocation, Fort Bend ISD presentation and Hispanic Republicans of Texas Fort Bend meeting, Fort Bend ISD presentation at Economic Development Council meeting. We have board members that write really, really well. Fort Bend ISD summer graduation. Together We Stand news conference at Marshall High School, back to school worship service at the Fort Bend Church, Fort Bend Executive Council meeting, Fort Bend Education Foundation golf tournament, Central Fort Bend Chamber legislative update, HGAC Brown Bag meeting, Vision and Planning Committee meeting, Policy Committee meeting, City of Sugar Land HOA meeting, Fort Bend ISD Night at the Skeeters, Marshall and Willow Ridge High School Community Forum, school visits Lakeview Elementary, Sugar Land Middle School, Neal Elementary, Sullivan Elementary School, Marshall High School, Missouri City Middle School, Elkins High School, Patterson Elementary, Madden Elementary, and Travis High School. And we are the #1 board in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Helliger. Okay, special reports. Do we have board members with special reports? Mr. George.
Thank you, Madam President and fellow board members. And during last week, the workshop session, we talk about, we were able to help the Islamic community of Greater Houston to celebrate their Eid. And they actually invited me to their facility this Friday and presented me this plaque, and I read it. The Islamic Society of Greater Houston Award of Appreciation presented to Fort Bend ISD for opening doors of the school facility for the Muslim community of Greater Houston to celebrate their Eid-ul-Adha. Prayers on September 1st during the catastrophic destruction caused by Hurricane Harvey, a true example of unity. So I thought it was very interesting, and I wanted to pass it on to Charles Dupree so that we could display that in an appropriate place. A very good example of a school being part of our community and stepping in, when they are in real need. And I'm very proud of that effort. And it was last week I explained how quick we were able to do that, like in 2 days when everybody was off. Mm-hmm. And to name, along with Dr. Dupree, I'd like to mention is Dallas High School Principal Jennifer Nichols, and also and also Corey Stewart, the assistant principal there, and they were very appreciative of their effort, and I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of this community.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. George, and thank you, Dr. Dupree, and all the staff for making that happen. That's exactly what we should be doing. Okay, Mrs. James.
Thank you, Mrs. Tossan. I have a special report tonight regarding our fellow trustee, Mr. Jim Rice. Jim Rice has served on the Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees since May of 2010. And after serving for 1 year as a secretary of the board, Mr. Rice was elected as president of the board in 2012. He was the board president when Dr. Dupree was hired as superintendent and served in that role for a total of 2 years. He then led the district through the transition to a new superintendent, and he began the strategic and systematic planning that guides our work today. Under his leadership, the core beliefs and commitment statements were developed, as well as the commissioning of the facilities needs assessment that led to Bond 2014. Because of his hard work, Bond 2014 was approved by voters with a vote of 74% vote of affirmation. At the same time that Mr. Rice was elected to be the Fort Bend ISD board president, he was also elected to serve on the Texas Association of School Boards, aka TASB, Board of Directors. The TASB board includes trustees from across the state of Texas. And as a TASB director for the past 5 years, Mr. Rice has built relationships with other trustees, with elected officials, and with the current Texas Commissioner of Education, Mike Morath. Furthermore, Mr. Rice was elected to serve as the chair of the TASB Legislative Committee in 2014, and then led the TASB membership to develop legislative priorities and resolutions to support public education in Texas. The results of his work were used to guide the advocacy efforts of school districts and trustees across the state during the 84th legislative session in 2015. And some of these principles are still part of the TASB legislative advocacy agenda. Last year, Mr. Rice was elected as the Secretary-Treasurer of the TASB Board of Directors. His election occurred last fall at the annual meeting of the Delegate Assembly. This Delegate Assembly has representatives from the approximately 1,100 school districts across the state of Texas. He served in that role this past year with his usual level of professionalism, humility, and passion. He has also used his role to continuously educate himself and our school district, including his fellow trustees, on the issues facing Texas public education. I am proud to announce that last month Mr. Rice was nominated by the TASB Board of Directors to serve as a second vice president for the state association. The Delegate Assembly will vote to elect him during the annual meeting on October 7th, and Mr. Burdine will be representing our school district as a voting delegate during that meeting. Mr. Rice is a servant leader who exemplifies many of the district's leadership competencies. I am excited and proud that he will be able to continue his leadership in our state by being elected as a TASB second vice president, and I wish to recognize and congratulate Mr. Rice on his leadership at the state level with TASB. We look forward to congratulating him on his election as second vice president in October.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. James. And don't we have a meeting to finish now? Thank you.
Yes, we do. But thank you, Mrs. James, for doing that on behalf of the board. We wanted to recognize that accomplishment and that nomination, and we do look forward to you serving as second vice president and representing Fort Bend ISD in the state of Texas. So thank you for your service, Mr. Rice. Okay, we do have a meeting to conduct. So we're going to move on to the consent agenda, and I am going to remove item 11A1 from the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything else they would like removed? Hearing nothing, may I have a motion, please?
Madam President, I move to approve the entire consent agenda as presented with the one exception of item 11A1.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. George. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. May I have a motion for item 11A1, please?
Madam President, I move to approve item 11A1 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. James. So this item was removed because it lists Mr. George as being nominated by the board, And I think upon further reflection and discussion that Mrs. James is actually prepared to submit her application for the stipend. And we felt like it would be easier and more convenient to just go ahead and allow Mrs. James to submit her application. And so I guess, Mr. Rice, if you don't mind withdrawing your motion and maybe restating it with Mrs. James as the nominee. Are you willing to do that?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a statement. We had that discussion, and I suggested Ms. James should go ahead and do that because she already have everything in place, and she got even the application from last year, and so otherwise I have to start all over everything. So that I thought it is convenient for all of us to do that.
Thank you, Mr. George.
Madam President, I would like to withdraw my motion by unanimous consent. Is that okay, Mr. Morris?
It is, provided no board member have any
is there
objection to your withdrawal of the motion.
Okay, with no objection, the motion is withdrawn. May I have a new motion, please?
Madam President, I would like to approve item 11A 1 with the substitution of Mrs. Grail James to receive the TASB advocacy stipend per Mr. George's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. George. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Moving on to item 12, action items. First up is consideration and approval of a resolution approving the 2017 tax year tax roll. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve action item 12A1 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. Rosenthal. Do we have discussion on this item? Hearing none, please vote.
Yeah, I don't think it was clear.
Try now.
It never cleared from the last. There it goes.
Okay, please vote. Motion passes. Item 12A2 is consider approval of a resolution adopting the combined ad valorem tax rate of $1.32 per $100 evaluation for the Fort Bend ISD for the 2017 tax year. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve action item 12A.2 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. Rosenthal. Do we have discussion on this item? Mr. Rice.
Yes. So, Mr. Bassett, I understand that by doing this, we are actually lowering our combined tax rate from $1.34 to $1.32 by 2 cents, and realizing at the same time an additional $18 million a year in revenue, which we're going to use to fund our budget. And I believe that's the $18 million is comprised of $11 million of state funding and $7 million of local funding, and lowering the tax rate at the same time. Is my understanding correct?
Yes, sir, exactly.
Okay. And this is in keeping with the budget that we have adopted earlier this year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Do we have additional discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. 12A3, approval of a resolution declaring the existence of an unforeseen emergency at Willow Ridge High School. May I have a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve action item 12A.3 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. Rosenthal. Do we have discussion? Mr.
Yes.
Rice?
Mr. Perez, I'm understanding that the original work that was undertaken at Willow Ridge High School was to replace the air handling units in that school. Is that right?
Yes, sir. The air handling units, one chiller, and then some miscellaneous work.
Air handling units, one chiller, and some miscellaneous work. And that, unfortunately, we all know mold crept into the school. That mold has been abated, and now that the abatement is complete, the engineers were able to go in and do some more investigative work to find out the cause of the mold, and they've discovered some additional deficiencies in the HVAC system that were not a part of the original scope, and it's their recommendation that that be taken care of at this time while we can, while all the students are moved out, so that when they move back in, we can be assured that that issue has been dealt with and will not reoccur, to the best of our knowledge.
That is correct.
And unfortunately, what we're talking about tonight is because the additional cost for that exceeds the statutory 25% limit in change orders unless there's an emergency. So if we were to approve this tonight, it means that the same contractor can move forward with this work and effect these repairs in a timely manner so that we can complete the work and move the students from Marshall back into Willow Ridge as quickly as possible.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Do we have additional discussion?
Just to restate that in a different way.
Oh.
So it means that if we don't do this, it means there will be a much longer delay until that actually gets to happen. So
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Mrs. James? I know. Thank you for following the rules.
I like following rules sometimes. Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Perez, so what I understand from this item is that there's additional work that needs to be done that we weren't anticipating being done when we last acted on this item. Is that right? That Mr. Rice, I guess, was mentioning the HVAC work. That's new, right? Is it new to our?
This is a new scope that we were not anticipating.
Okay, and it's new even though what you're saying, the original project was replacing HVAC system
It
components?
replaced one HVAC system and chiller, and it replaced the air handlers. But there's a total of 6 chillers. And with the study that was conducted from DBR, their findings and recommendation is that these chillers are literally on their last leg, and there's the possibility that once we bring in the student load into the building, that those systems could not keep up or fail, and we could have high humidity, and we unfortunately could get mold to reoccur.
Okay, and by student load, you mean like when the people would come back into the building as opposed to right now when there aren't any people in there?
Yes, ma'am. Each one of us has a heat load, and so right now it's empty, and that's not there. But once you bring in 600 kids, it brings in, and the teachers, it brings in that heat load, which is a different, and we ourselves give off humidity, so you have to combat that.
Okay, so thank you. So if there's all this HVAC work then that it sounds like it's kind of an emergency situation if we want to get school started back at Willow Ridge. Does that, is it going to delay, do you think it's going to further delay the process of getting back into the school, or do we have any understanding of what that might look like?
We're still looking at a transition during the Christmas break.
During the Christmas break?
Correct.
That was new. I think, okay, that seemed new. I thought we had been talking about October before.
with this work and the work that we were not able to do over the last 3 weeks, we're looking at Christmas break to make that transition.
I didn't need it. Okay, all right. And so I'm assuming we're working on a communication plan, because I think we're all saying we didn't realize that. So I don't know if we have that in mind, but I'm just suggesting that that might be a point of communication. Then my last question is just to clarify for the community what they might expect going back into the remediated and restored Willow Ridge High School. It's going to have, the floor plan is going to be the same and the setup is going to be the same, but it's going to have fresh flooring, fresh furniture, fresh paint, and those types of things, right? Would that be the expectation? What am I missing in that?
That and the new air conditioning system.
That and the new air conditioning
That's
system.
important.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Ms. Hilliger.
Yeah, just to piggyback off what she said, with the chillers being, I guess, of age, were they already part of our maintenance plan to redo or to replace? I'm just curious.
They were not in the replacement cycle for the bond work, other than the one chiller. They were in there. There was 4 in the assessment that was done in the past. There was 4 different levels that were done, and this was, we did 1 and 2 with the 2014 bond. 3 and 4 caught some of this, but it was some years out. Bond 2018 obviously would have caught this as we do the new assessment, but being able to bring in a team early to look at it, they identified it needs to be done now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I guess I also learned something new today, that we all have heat loads.
I knew you were going to do it. Turn your mic. Okay. Mrs. James, you have another question?
Well, it's not another question, but I just want to say thank you for bringing in the team to do the assessment, because I know when we talked about this in July, we were all wondering, well, what was the cause of, how did we get to the point of having mold so prolific in the building? And so thank you for doing that and figuring out and finding the root cause, because we do want the best learning environment possible at Willow Ridge.
Thank you. Okay, please vote. Motion passes. Last on the action item are consideration and approval of a resolution accepting donations from the Sartarsha Middle School PTO in order to, it's $146,000 for the improvement and expansion of the Sartarsha Middle School track. May I have a motion, please?
Madam President, I move the approval of action item 12B1 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. James. Do we have discussion? Yes, Mrs. James.
Thank you, Mrs. Hassan. So once again, I want to say thank you to the Sartarsha Middle School PTO for organizing and all these MUDs to come together with this donation, and they themselves raising money. I happened to drive by Garcia Middle School the other day, and I noticed that there was, the MUD there is putting in a sidewalk all along that road, which I guess is maybe Richmond Avenue or something, right along there in front of the Stratford Park neighborhood and so forth. They're doing it on where their MUD district office is, but they're doing it essentially from the Oyster Creek crossing all the way along, connecting some streets, but it stops right in front of Garcia Middle School. And I thought to myself, darn it, I wish we would have known they were putting this in, because we could have coordinated some effort to have sidewalk so it actually made it all the way to to the middle school parking lot, or at least to the front of the school where kids walk up, because I do believe there are kids that walk in that vicinity. So kudos, I guess I just want to say that. Kudos to Satarsha Middle School parents for coordinating all that, and I think it shows how we can work with the MUDs in our community, and it's important that we stay in contact with these groups. We've had a couple of agreements, I know, over in the Siena area with the levee improvement districts and over by Oakland Elementary as well. And I just encourage the staff to keep ears to the ground to watch for opportunities that we can coordinate our efforts.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Do we have additional discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. We will now review future board meeting agenda items. Dr. Dupree.
Yes, ma'am. October has got a number of meetings. We've got the Superintendent Summative Evaluation on October 2nd. October 16th will be the workshop. You'll notice it's a little out of sequence to our normal meeting schedule because of the TASB conference. But we will meet with the workshop on the 16th, but that will be held at Quail Valley Middle School for the listening tour and board workshop at that school. And then on October 23rd, we'll do the regular board meeting. The reports for the month are going to be around the development of the educational specifications that PBK will be facilitating, as well as an implementation of the learning management system and the new curriculum. And then we'll do a report on the 23rd on student planning that the board has specifically asked about how we use Naviance, how our counselors engage with students about planning, as well as the budget update about how we're working to close the gaps in this year's budget as well as going toward the future. And then on October 30th, the board will meet to conduct their board team building. There's a number of routine items, class size waivers, as well as you heard at the last Monday night, the state required reports that the board will need to approve in regard to Ridgemont Elementary School being IR. And we'll also launch in November the plan to update the facilities master planning and attendance boundaries. So we'll begin that dialogue with the board with an update in November, then the process would actually begin in January.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. Do we have questions from the board members? Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Rosenthal?
I have one quick announcement.
Okay.
I'd like to announce a new contestant in the E-Team sock contest. We have Dr. Scamardo over here. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to challenge Steve
all
Bassett.
Control of these board members.
I'm going to challenge Steve Bassett, since he's on the front row, that he step up his game with the socks.
Can I get a motion to adjourn? Can anyone?
I move that we adjourn.
We are adjourned.
I was thinking.